down, yelling out money, anything. Hey, ooh, got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when I'm getting to the back. Hey, got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when the lane moving fast. Hey, hey, let them all cross. If they hate, then let them hate and make a bigger boss. Hey.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, you guys, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve, so you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. We are really live today. We are in person. We are at the TIA Capital Ideas Conference out here in San Antonio, Texas. And I have my great friend, Dawn, with Green Screens. Dawn, thank you so much for taking the time this morning.
Of course. Always happy to be with you, Chris.
You guys have obviously been all over the news here. And, you know, for those of you who have been living under a rock, Green Screens recently went through a very exciting chapter. And I want to talk about the build-up kind of to that, though, because when we first met, you were just starting out there.
Yeah.
And what was that like? Kind of like going through the early stages of developing a business, a product, to get it out there to the market, because we see so many products come into market that maybe don't make it for a myriad of reasons. What was that like early on? Because everybody sees the headlines now, but do they remember day one, month one?
I mean, hard. It's the short answer to your question is hard. And as people say, you know, startups are not for the faint of heart. And it was difficult. You know, not only were we a startup company, you know, our funding was not fantastic at the very beginning. But we were doing something really novel, right? Something that had never been done before. So we were not only having to, you know, build trust and sell our product, but really educate the market on what we were doing, because it hadn't been done before. So it was really difficult. And, you know, funny story, I think some of your listeners may have heard this from me before, but it was never intended that I was going to remain the CEO. So Green Screens was founded. We just had our 5th anniversary in March, right? So 5 years. We put our product into market 4 years ago, so April of 2021. But I joined the company in August of 2020 because there was a product, or let's say I'll call it pre-MVP, post-hypothesis. And we had 3 early beta customers. So thank you, NFI, Gulf Relay, now Mariner, and RDS for hanging in there with us and really helping us test and build out the product and everything. But we didn't yet really have a go-to-market strategy. Didn't, you know, have our marketing messaging, things like that. So when I joined, the intent was I would be interim CEO, help the founders find the permanent CEO, but in the meantime, work through that product, the go-to-market, all of that, and then stay on board as Chief Product Officer once we found the CEO.
Yeah. So what was it? Was it going through multiple candidates, and then did they just come to you and you're like, we're going to rip the interim title away and you're just going to stay?
Well, it was mutual. They didn't rip it away from me, but you know, I'm in prison, help. Blink if you need help. No, I'm kidding. So it was a lot of things. It was multiple candidates. I think initially there were a lot of candidates that were brought to the table, but I found that they had the same skill set that I had. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, we don't need 2 of me.
Yeah.
We need someone who complements me. And look, I'll be honest, I had participated in the sales process, but I had never led a sales team.
Yeah.
I had never raised money before, and I knew at some point as a startup, we were going to need to do that. So I used to joke with the board and say, someday you're going to want a real CEO and I'm going to help you find them. But we did bring a couple people on that just didn't work out for various reasons. I think, you know, great professionals, but didn't have the experience in a startup or didn't have the experience working with brokers, because it's really important to me that we have that empathy for our customers and we can at every level of our company. So, you know, we went through multiple candidates, and then in 2022, we did raise money. right? So we raised first a seed round, and then pretty quickly thereafter a Series A. And it was really at that time that the board, our board of directors, was like, okay, are you ready? Like, you're kind of, you've been doing the job for 2 years now, so maybe it's time. And I agreed to it. So.
What was that like, trying to raise for the first time when you've never been through that, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of founders across every industry that think that, hey, we got to go raise capital. We don't know what to expect. And it's out, you only hear about the successes, that come along with it. What's something that you learned as a first time kind of going in to raise money that prepared you for the next?
Due diligence is not fun, and we actually had some pretty easy due diligence. But it's so as a startup with our seed round, we ended up being oversubscribed for our seed round, which is a really good problem to have. But it took us a long time to find a lead investor. So we had plenty of investors that were willing to write a small check.
Yeah.
But none of the small checks added up to the total amount that we felt that we needed. But a lot, and then even at that, though, the people who were willing to write a small check were hesitant to do so without a lead institutional investor. And that was the hard part. That was finding the lead institutional investor, someone who was willing to write a bigger check size, someone who is more entrenched in the venture capital world. And we ended up eventually finding Tiger Global to do that for us. But it's just, I learned how to do a pitch deck. I learned that sometimes less is more. And when you're doing the meetings with the investors. So it's been interesting.
So how was that? Because I've heard the opposite, where it's just like the smaller how did you describe them? Like you had
smaller check size,
the smaller,
then the large institutionals. Yeah.
Usually it's the opposite, right? Where there's no smaller investment until you have the one person who's willing to put the check down, and then people kind of attract around. Is that accurate?
I've seen it go both ways.
Okay.
I've seen it go both
I've never
ways.
raised before,
yeah,
but
for us, we had, a very good network of smaller investors who were very, very interested, but we were lacking that one. And I think it was, because at the time we were still pretty new. Our ARR revenue was low. We weren't in our hyper growth stage quite yet, right? So there were a lot of reasons for hesitation for some of those larger investors. Now, that was for the seed round. By the time we got to our A round, which was only 9 months later, we weren't even raising money. We were still in a good place, but we approached our investors and said, hey, we are planning for next year. At what point should we consider raising again? And in order to do so, what are the milestones that we need to have achieved? And it was our lead investor at that point said, you guys are killing it.
Yeah.
I'm willing to double down on my investment now.
Oh, wow.
So, and that was the last time we raised money was November of 22, which was perfect timing.
Yeah.
Because if we had waited much longer, the multiples wouldn't have been what they were.
Yeah.
The capital market just really dried up after that.
What advice would you give? There's a lot of companies that are here that might be seeking investment for the first time, or there's going to be people who are listening to this that might be walking into it. What advice would you give to them to better prepare themselves to maybe look more appealing on paper?
Yeah, I mean, look, it depends on whether, I know your audience is both tech and well, everybody is, right? It depends on the type of business you are. If you are a SaaS vendor, just really get intimate with the key SaaS metrics that investors are looking at. Rule of 40, magic number, all of those things, return on marketing investment, and track those and be on top of them and know exactly what they are and know where your business needs to be in order to be appealing to an investor to drive the multiple you're looking for. On the converse of that, if you're a service provider, a broker, a carrier, whatever the case may be, you're going to have different metrics, right, that investors care about. I mean, for the services-based industries, usually multiples are a multiple on EBITDA, right? Versus for a SaaS startup, it's usually a multiple on revenue, on ARR, right?
Yeah.
So just understand what the metrics are that are going to be meaningful to your investors and make sure you know them. And if you're not hitting kind of the at least average or above average, that you can explain your path to getting there. Understand use of funds. How are you going to use the money? And what the benefit to the investor might be. And then I would say, lastly, is make sure you're looking for investors that are going to complement you and fill your blind spots as a business, right? So maybe you're a startup and you can't afford to hire some senior executive in a particular area of your business. Try to find an investor who's going to bring that expertise to the table for you to help you fill those blind spots and grow the business.
No, that's I also like me being an emotional person, like founding my companies, right? Like this is my baby. You know, I don't like I know that we have areas of improvement that we need to make, but like I also don't want to be told how shitty we are either at a certain thing. Do you think that that's something that people should be more prepared for, to like don't take it as personal? And this is always this is a controlled environment, a lot easier said than done.
Absolutely.
How important is it to try and look at it from a pragmatic standpoint, that this is not an attack on Chris Jolly, the man, as much as like the numbers are the numbers?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, investors want to have as low risk as possible and a return on their dollars, right?
Yeah.
It is not a personal attack. It is all about, do I see that? Do I see an end to getting that return? And, for me, I was not the founder. So I didn't necessarily have that emotional attachment, right? Where it's still my baby. And I don't want to say that I'm not emotionally attached to it.
No,
because
absolutely.
I am, but I was not the founder, right?
Yeah.
So don't take it personally, and really rather take it constructively. And that's generally the way that it is intended, to help you then. Okay, well, and usually, VCs or investors, they're generally good people. Usually it's going to be not now, but if you can do X, Y, and Z, let's talk, in 6 months or whatever the case may be.
And I think that that's one thing that I'm trying to, like, as a founder, I'm really trying to work on. Not that we're like out there seeking capital, but like trying to look at that as like the leader, as opposed to like, this is the thing that I started out of my bedroom, right? And trying to remove that emotional connection as best as possible, because, people, like, you got to make money, right? Like, a lot of people don't want to hear, like, if we give you $5 million, are we going to get 7.5 back, or whatever the terms are that come along with it? And that's not necessarily a knock on your capabilities or your product. And, because I've read a lot of books about this stuff. And, sometimes I've also said, though, like, sometimes you can have the perfect product, the perfect business plan, but the market's not ready for it. So therefore you're not going to attract investment. Now, kind of switching to current events here.
Yeah.
Do you think that having a bunch of companies come in and offer the same thing is better for the right business? And I say, like, if you guys had 87 competitors who did exactly what Green Screens did, do you think that's going to help you stand out? Or do you think that that's more of a deterrent for out there seeking capital?
For seeking capital, I think a crowded competitive landscape is not good for seeking capital. Really, because that's one of the things, and that's one of the questions we were asked very frequently when we were raising money, and even with our recent acquisition, is what is keeping somebody else from doing what you are doing and lapping you, right? And ironically, the short answer is capital. Right? Like money is what's going to keep somebody else, because I can go faster, things like that. But no, a crowded competitive landscape for tech, right? For tech specifically. Obviously, in the brokerage world, in the carrier world, it is a crowded landscape just by nature. But for tech, it's not good.
So now that we're post acquisition, everyth's out in the world.
Not yet.
I know.
We're
Gosh,
post announcement.
Post announcement. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not a professional here, guys. But now that it's here, now that the numbers are public and everything, do you feel like, as a leader, now there's more pressure on you to make better calls on capital deployment, where the direction of the company? Do you feel like there's more of a microscope on you now than there was before?
I don't feel that there's more of a microscope, but our business has been extremely capital efficient.
Yeah.
We have not disclosed what we had raised in our previous rounds, but I will tell you that after 3 years, we still have, more than a third of that money
Hell
left
yeah.
in the bank, right? So we have grown very, very quickly. Our revenue has grown 3 or 4x almost, but we've been very capital efficient in doing that. So that being said, I don't feel like there's more of a microscope on me. Just be careful about that. Now, I will say we brought fewer people to this conference this year because I am trying to spend more carefully, because I don't want to just burn the money we have just because I can, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't need it. So, but I don't really feel like I'm under more of a microscope. I would say that if we had not announced the acquisition and we were continuing to try to make that capital we raised last and preparing to raise another round, then I probably would have been under more of a microscope,
Yeah.
right? So,
Because you see a lot of that, right? Like, especially over these last couple of years, that there was a lot of companies that they raised lots and lots of money, and you can't, like, for me personally, I see some of these numbers and I'm like, how do you spend that? Right? Like, how do you actually go through and blow all of that money?
Right.
Not saying that it was all wasted, but like, it's an incomprehensible amount to most individuals, right? Especially when you're talking hundreds of millions, if not into the $1 billion mark. And this is not even necessarily a transportation thing.
Right.
This is kind of just tech startups across the board. You see $1 billion cap raises and you're like, how do you go through that? Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
What's the biggest misconception though about actually building a product and what it really costs as opposed to what you think it should cost?
Well, again, it depends on how fast you want to go and grow, right? I mean, for us, I might screw up this number, but like 87% of our expenses are people.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't have a high, our marketing budget is only 11%, right? It's, the majority of our spend is people, and that's predominantly development,
Yeah.
customer success, because we do have a kind of more high touch, as you know, customer
Yep.
success engagement. We don't just show up and screw in software and go away and then answer your email if you have a question. We're really engaged with our customers. And then sales, right? As salespeople would be the next place where we spend a lot of money. And then marketing budget, being at shows like this, would be second to people. So if you want to go fast, you need people and you need money. But one thing that I knew even coming into this is the phrase I like to use, and it might not be quite PC, but
You keep it real on this show. Come
I
on,
know,
Don, you know that.
9 women can't have a baby in 1 month, right?
Yeah.
So even when we're getting pressure from our stakeholders and they're like, well, we want you to do more faster, it's like, can you hire more people? And it's like, well, I can, but then you get to the point of diminishing returns where, again, 9 women can't have a baby in 1 month, no matter what you try to do, right? Like, it's just not going to happen. So it's always going to take longer than you think. It's always going to take more money than you think, right? But to your point about how do you possibly spend that much money, we have not raised double digits, right? So our total raise has been single-digit millions of dollars, which I'm very proud of. But when we did our first raise, I was like, I mentioned earlier, you need to know how you're going to use the money. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to use all this money. That's a lot of money. Like, oh my gosh, but it goes fast, right? So.
No, and that's the thing is, I feel like social media makes business seem so easy. Everybody only posts the success and how great everything is, but it's like I've spent countless nights over my career as an entrepreneur, which is 5 years now this month, wondering how am I going to pay my bills in 30 days and how am I going to get more revenue? Because you hit that point where you're like, we're doing everything that we can on paper, right? Like I can't make any more calls, right? Like I can't physically create any more hours in the day to work more. And it's like, you're sitting there and you're just wondering, like, is this real? Once you guys hit that though, once it became like a really real thing, when you said it takes longer than you think, I think those beginning stages, now it's tough to go back, because now it's like once you start getting the revenue and you start getting the recognition and stuff out there, now it's a whole different set of expectations, right? And because it's easy to sit here and, again, people look at the highlight reel, but now it's like, where do we go, right? So it's like, what's next for green screens? Because that's got to be a constant thing. Like, hey, this is great, but like, what more can you do?
Yeah. No, you're right. The expectations always do increase. And look, it took us like 18 to 20 months to get the revenue flywheel really going in our business. Like the first year we had 0 revenue, and the second year we had low 6 figures of revenue, right? And that revenue flywheel didn't really start until end of Q4, really Q1 of 22, which is the same time we were trying to raise investment money, right?
Yeah.
So, but you're right. The expectations always increase from a revenue perspective, from a profitability perspective. We actually just in the fourth quarter achieved profitability. So, 5 years in profitability. But you have to keep innovating, right? You have to keep innovating. You have to keep being imaginative. You've seen our marketing where we get very creative and scrappy in our marketing, right?
I love it.
We have been very fortunate that social media has been a huge source, and sponsoring podcasts like yours and things like that. And we've been very successful with that, which fortunately is a low-cost marketing channel, right? Social media. And our team has just done a fabulous job with that. So.
And here's another thing. Yes, Green Screens has been a long partner of mine, but I just used them this morning to win 2 shipments that we're having loaded right now. So take that for what it's worth. But I am an actual broker who is prospecting and moving actual freight, and I am a customer of theirs as well. And we just won shipments this morning with it. We literally use it all the time. And it's like, I'm fortunate in a sense now, Don, where I've been doing all of this media stuff long enough where I have companies come to me quite frequently asking to advertise on my show. And I'm fortunately able to pick and choose, like, do I believe in their product or not? And it's like, I remember when I first heard of you guys and I saw that and I'm like, dude, this is different, right? Like, this is not your typical, here's a price, go out there. Like, how quick it is.
Tell me more.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it, right? Because I feel like the number 1 and number 2 question I get, A, how do I find shippers? B, how do I quote freight?
Right.
And it's easy to sit there and look at some certain rates over the last 30, 60, or 90 days, but like, is that the get me a truck right now in the next 5-minute price? And that is the biggest misconception that's out there, is that like, all the freight that you're going to get is just going to be easy. It's going to land in you're going to have all this time. 99% of the business you're going to get from a business development perspective is going to be last minute. Hey man, you stop by. I need a truck in the next hour. What can you get me?
Right.
And that is where your guys' product, I feel like, is the most accurate rates that are out there.
I agree.
And that's what we love the most, because again, when you're on the other side of the fence and you're building a book of business, you don't have shippers, you get a shipper. You need to know, like, and you don't have the money to lose in the event that you're off. That confidence that comes along with it. When I look at your guys' product and I look at the rates, I know, and I love that confidence meter that's on there as well, where that's sitting. And that makes it even more convincing for me to put that rate out there, because again, now that's my brand to my customer to show, like, are you actually worth a shit on what you're quoting us, and are you going to come through with it?
Right.
So like, anybody out there who's hesitating on anything, like, it's the real deal. Like, and it to me, it's like knowing that that's going to come through and our customer's going to be like, yes, send in the truck. That's what you need. And that's like, for me, it's like the biggest sense of relief that comes with it.
I love to hear that. I love that feedback, from a real customer. And you're right on. I mean, look, mispricing freight is going to have 1 or 2 results, right? Either you're going to lose money and your boss is going to be pissed off, or you're going to have to give the load back and your customer's going to be pissed off. Or I guess the third outcome is you have an unreliable carrier who fucks it up somewhere along the line, and then your customer's pissed off too, right? So getting that price right is so important, or the cost, understanding what you're going to pay, so then you can appropriately price it to your customer. We say high enough to meet your targets, but low enough to win the business, right?
Yeah, so. And I love the little coaching that is inside of there as well, right? Like your target sell rate you know? And I think that's another thing too, where it's like, hey, I won this load. Shit, what do I quote? How do I price it out to a carrier? And all my carrier friends who are listening, I'm not talking about giving you guys cheap freight here, but it's one of those things like, where do I start? How do I make sure like I have a target? I mean, the negotiation phase of it, that's a whole other side of the business as well. That's not necessarily talked about. And we're coming off of a market where it is kind of like, you can kind of quote anything and carriers are going to take the rates because freight is not as plentiful as it once was.
Right.
So people need to move their trucks out there. And it's like that. It's just another tool to help you know that like you're out there quoting a fair rate for the market that's going to get a carrier who's actually going to come in and do the load and not take that rate and then be out there shopping it to try and find a better paying load.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely. I love it when you talk about our partners. I really do.
Well, you know, I'm very fortunate to have advertisers that I get to use in both of my businesses, right? And it makes a big difference out there. And to me, it's just like with all of this stuff, with podcasting and like I want to create a platform that people can come in and just learn from, right? Like, no, because like as a business owner, how do you know, like you could just walk around the show here. There's 100 vendors demoing. How, as a business owner who's signing the check, because again, when you're in the real world and capital is a thing that you got to watch dollars and cents, how do you know that that's going to be an ROI for your business?
Right.
And that's why it's like, I want to do this is again, it's just an education platform. Learn this, you guys. Learn how the industry actually works. This isn't pie in the sky. This is for the 90% of the industry who are out there trying to build their stuff up.
Right. Right. And you're authentic, right? You're no bullshit. That's one of our mottos, and no bullshit. I don't know.
And that's exactly it. And that's how it needs to be, because, you know, again, we need to continue to deliver that stuff out there. And you guys are on the forefront of that. I appreciate you for everything, the support, having a phenomenal product, but just being a great person as well. You've been phenomenal to know over these years, Dawn. But how does anybody reach out to you guys to find out more about what you guys got going on?
Okay. Well, if you're here at TIA, stop by and see us at booth 702. We have an exciting new product that we just announced yesterday, Green Screen's Intuition long-term contract forecasts or predictions. So stop by, see it in live action at our booth. You can reach out to us at sales@greenscreens.ai, catch us on LinkedIn. Greenscreens.ai is our website, or you can always email me directly, Dawn@greenscreens.ai.
I love it. If you guys can't find green screens for whatever reason, which you might be blind if you can't, but if you can find them
everywhere,
hit me up. I will gladly put you guys in contact with them. But that's going to be it for today, you guys. As always, if you got value in what you heard, subscribe to the show. If you're feeling really ambitious after this one, which you should be, rank the show on iTunes and Spotify, because if you saw value, that's how your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon. And now we just end the stream like we always